Hi! My name is Mary, and I am a huge fan of Mass Effect. In my last video, I pitched the Mass Effect trilogy to you because I love it, and I think everybody should give it a shot. And with the trilogy remaster, aka Mass Effect Legendary Edition out, there's never been a better time to give it a try. I recommend going back and watching my first Mass Effect video if you haven't yet, but the too long didn't watch version. The first Mass Effect game takes place in the future, after humans have explored the galaxy and found it full of intelligent alien life. The story is about the human Commander Shepard, given name, backstory, appearance, and gender, all chosen by you, the player, uncovering a galactic conspiracy that threatens all of humanity and possibly all alien life as well. I walked you through the character creator and how its choices can affect your game, all as spoiler-free as possible. Next up, general advice and my personal take on a suggested mission order. I'm going to continue to be vague about story and plot details moving forward, but some expectation spoilers can't be avoided, so heads up for that. Moving on, you've created a character. Congrats! Now that that's done, let me give you a breakdown of this game's main role-playing mechanics. As I said in my first video, this is not a guide to combat mechanics or a walkthrough, but rather a guide to the story mechanics. It's my way of gently easing you into what can be an overwhelming amount of new concepts if you're dipping your toes into story and choice-heavy games for the first time. Part 1. Conversations. I already went over Renegade and Paragon scores in my last video. To recap, this is the morality system, with Paragon players being generally more diplomatic and Renegade players being more ruthless. The game keeps track of which way your choices swing by assigning Paragon or Renegade points to your Shepard. I promised you more detail, and that detail starts with the dialogue wheel. During cutscenes, when it comes time for your Shepard to speak, a dialogue wheel will pop up, prompting you to choose how your interaction goes. Around the wheel are paraphrased versions of what, if selected, your Shepard will say out loud. If you've played Dragon Age 2, Dragon Age Inquisition, Star Wars The Old Republic, or Mass Effect Andromeda, the dialogue wheels in those games are based on the Mass Effect trilogy wheel. In general, options on the left side of the wheel are elaboration, clarification, or investigative options that help you get more details out of the character you're talking to. Any option that says investigate will lead to a series of topics you can ask about. If new dialogue options pop up around the investigate option after you've asked a question, then you can use those new options to get the character to elaborate on their answer. They often disappear when you ask a completely different question, so if you are interested in those elaborations, then prioritize them. Options on the right side of the dialogue wheel tend to move the conversation along, so make sure you finish any investigating you want to do before you choose those. These dialogue options usually come in threes, and you can only say one of them. The top options are Paragon, sometimes granting you Paragon points, the middle options are more neutral, and the bottom options are Renegade, sometimes granting you Renegade points. This is where a lot of the game's smaller choices come in, where you choose how your Shepard reacts and what their beliefs and opinions are. There are, of course, exceptions to that general dialogue wheel layout, but as you play the game, you will get a better feel for how to navigate conversations. Part 2. Charm and Intimidate. When you're leveling up on your squad page, you will have various abilities that you can spend experience points on, mostly related to the combat mechanics. Two of the role-playing options are Charm and Intimidating, and they're only available on your Shepard's page. Initially, you will only have room to put 3 points into either, but as you gain more Paragon and Renegade points, you will unlock more spaces in Charm and Intimidate to put points into. You can only put as many points into Charm and Intimidate as there are spaces available at any given moment, so it's best to focus on whichever one corresponds with your highest score, either Paragon or Renegade. A high Renegade score unlocks Intimidate spaces, and a high Paragon score unlocks Charm spaces. Putting points into those spaces unlocks Charm and Intimidate dialogue options. Every now and again, a blue or red piece of dialogue will appear on your dialogue wheel. Blue lines are Charm options, and red lines are Intimidate options. These are alternatives to the Paragon, Neutral, and Renegade dialogue options discussed earlier, and they will always be more effective in achieving your goals than the regular dialogue options. Intimidating usually involves threatening someone into getting what you want, and Charming usually involves being more diplomatic and convincing people to give you what you want. The more difficult a person is to convince, the more Charm and Intimidate spaces you'll need to have put points into in order to unlock the dialogue options. If you don't have enough points, the Charm Intimidate dialogue options will appear grayed out, and you will be unable to select them. It is a good idea, then, to put points into Charm and Intimidate as soon as you have those spaces available. Many people choose to commit to being either purely Paragon or purely Renegade in order to unlock all of the Charm and Intimidate options. You don't have to do this. The Charm and Intimidate options in the first Mass Effect are meant as a bonus, an alternative means to resolve conflict for people who manage to unlock them. My very first Shepard felt very strongly Paragon about some subjects and very strongly Renegade about others, and the result was a Shepard that had a Renegade Renegade and Paragon score that were nearly equal. Because of this, she was unable to unlock enough spaces to pass some of the more difficult Charm and Intimidate checks, and often had to find other ways to resolve conflict. Sometimes this meant paying someone off, sometimes it meant resorting to violence, and sometimes it meant my Shepard just didn't get what she wanted. I've since played characters who have unlocked all the options, either on the Charm or Intimidate side of things, and it's fun all three ways. It's fun to threaten your way through the game, it's fun to use your wits and persuade your way through the game, and honestly, it's fun to not have everything always go your way. All I'm saying is, if you're the kind of person who likes to strictly roleplay a character, don't worry if the personality you're playing doesn't unlock all the Charm and Intimidate options. It'll still be a ton of fun, I promise. Part 3. But you're a completionist. I'm afraid a single completionist playthrough of Mass Effect just isn't possible. One of the really appealing things about BioWare games in general is that they're so replayable. The reason they have such great replay value is because it's impossible to do everything with a single Shepard because of all the choices you must make. Even pre-game choices, like your background, will change the way quests and characters interact with you from playthrough to playthrough. You can only do one romance to completion, and there are lots of choices with repercussions that affect not only the outcome of the first game, but the entire series. That is to say, don't worry too much about missing the odd piece of dialogue or side mission your first time through. In order to satisfy your completionist heart, you're going to have to do multiple playthroughs anyway, and it's always exciting to find a new side quest that you didn't find before, or to discover a new way that a mission can be resolved. There's a reason that I've played through the first game 8 times. Part 4. Squad Goals. You can recruit a total of 6 people to join your squad, though only 2 can come with you on any given mission. They all have different combat strengths, so you should either try to balance the combat biotic tech ratio of your mission squads, or prioritize based on the mission's threat. For example, if you're tasked with shutting down rogue AIs, it's a good idea to have a tech-heavy squad with you. Actually, it's always a good idea to have at least one person who has high-tech/hacking skills so that you can gather all the loot from locked objects that you come across. Also, if you're about to go on a mission that you think might personally interest one of your companions, then you should take them with you. They occasionally have unique things to say about situations with which they have a personal connection. Speaking of personal connections, your squad is also important to your story. When you're just hanging out on your ship between missions, you can talk to all of them. Do this a lot. If you take just one lesson away from this video, please let it be that. Asking your squaddies about their lives helps you learn about their character, and helps them come to trust your Shepard. Even when you've exhausted all dialogue options with them, make sure you check in regularly after story missions, or if something has changed for them personally. For example, if you ask someone about, say, their family, and their answer was vague, it's likely that once they trust you more, or something about their familial situation has changed, that if you ask them again, they'll open up more. Some of them will even come to trust you enough to ask a favor, opening up unique missions. Prioritize these personal quests if you want the friendship to continue to develop. You also have some other shipmates beyond your squad mates, i.e. people who help run the ship but don't join you on missions. For example, characters like your engineer, your navigator, and your doctor can all be found around various places on the ship and asked questions early on in the game. Your ship's pilot can also be asked questions at the helm, and if you check in with him after major story missions, he usually has something to say about what just happened. Finally, the place you'll spend the most time after your ship is a huge space station known as the Citadel. It is the political and cultural center of most spacefaring civilizations. After major missions, you can check in at the human embassy with some politicians and see what they think of your progress. Part 5. Romance. As I've mentioned a few times before, a couple of your squad mates are available to be romanced. To recap, Shepard can romance 2 squaddies, either a female presenting bisexual alien who is interested in Shepard regardless of their gender, or a human of a gender differing from Shepard's own. Since all romance options available to your Shepard's gender will show interest in your Shepard, it is extremely easy to accidentally end up in a romance. BioWare fans lovingly call this being ninja-manced. If you play Dragon Age Origins, you may have had to break up with Leliana before you even realized you were dating. Or maybe you dated her on purpose. She is a delight, so that's very possible. The point is, the same thing can happen in Mass Effect. Unfortunately, unlike Origins, there is no easy way to end a relationship once it's been possibly accidentally started. So if you don't want to date a character, be very clear about it up front. If they say something like, "I like you, and I think you might like me too," don't say something wishy-washy like, "You're great, but I'm trying to save the galaxy right now, so..." If there's an option to give a firm, "No, you're mistaken, I'm not interested," then take it. It might seem mean, but I promise you they'll get over it. If you have the opposite problem and you can't choose between your 2 love interests, don't worry. You can pursue both for a time. They will eventually make you choose, but pursuing both simultaneously does delay that choice. It's also technically the only way to break up with someone in this game, but since you'll end up with the other person, the only way to romance no one is to not pursue anyone from the start. Try to embrace it if a romance does happen accidentally, though. Getting ninja-manced is like a Bioware rite of passage at this point, and even though there's no easy way to end the relationship in the first game, it doesn't have to carry over for the entire series. Part 6. Consequences. Every proper decision you make will have consequences. A lot of these consequences are small and or short-term, but some are big and or long-term. And when I say long-term, know that I mean long-term. You can take your finished game save file from Mass Effect and import it into Mass Effect 2, and again for Mass Effect 3. This means things you did in the first game can alter the way things happen in the second and third games. If the stakes seem high on a mission, trust that they really are that high. If the characters around Shepard are acting like the decision they're about to make is life and death, believe them. While there are definitely times where a decision seems like a bigger deal than it actually ends up being, there are plenty of times where Bioware doesn't kid around, and they are not afraid to break your heart. This means that you will have to prioritize goals and make sacrifices. Those sacrifices can easily be characters' lives. Part 7. Mission Order. When it comes to the rest of the gameplay mechanics, there isn't a lot I can say that isn't already written in the game itself. Play around in your inventory to get an understanding of the different options available for weapons and armor, and to get an understanding of what certain weapons and armor mods do. The only other thing you maybe need to know is that biotic characters have amps, which enhance their space magic powers, and omni-tools are like smartphones of the future and enhance tech powers, so give your best amps to your biotic characters and your best omni-tools to your techie teammates. With that out of the way, let's talk about missions. Your missions, or quests, or levels if you will, are divided into two categories: missions and assignments. Missions are the ones that will definitely push the story of the first Mass Effect forward. Assignments are usually their own contained stories, though they can flesh out some of the main story lore and can be done at any time. Technically, all assignments and missions can be done at any time in any order once they've been assigned. I'm a bit of a weirdo who likes to knock out her assignments as early as possible, but they can get a bit repetitive, so breaking up your assignments with story missions and vice versa is probably the better way for most people to play. The more exploring you do, whether that be visiting every star system on the galaxy map, driving to every corner on every visitable planet's map, or physically going through every room of every building you enter, the more assignments and world building you'll stumble upon. As for the main story missions, well, here's where I may get a bit spoilery. I'm going to be super vague, so it's mostly expectation spoilers rather than plot or story spoilers, but if your spoiler tolerance is as low as mine, then you'll want to skip ahead to this time code. Each story mission takes place on a different planet. Once you're through the opening story mission, you'll have 3 main missions available for you on 3 different locations. Every Mass Effect fan you talk to is going to have different opinions on the ideal order here. I personally recommend going to the Artemis Tau system and doing the Find Liara Tassoni mission first, then going to Pharos, then Noveria, with whatever assignments you want to do sprinkled in between. I find that I like the way the story builds best in that order, though honestly switching up the order in which you do Noveria and Pharos is not that big a deal. It will be obvious once you play why I think you should go to Artemis Tau first, but the game does keep track of the order you do these missions in, so even if you completely disregard this order, there can be fun little acknowledgements of what was left for last. Once you do 2 of those first 3 major missions, you will get the opportunity to go to Virmire, a planet where another major mission takes place. I highly recommend going to Virmire after completing all 3 of the Artemis, Tau, Pharos, and Noveria missions, even though you can technically access it earlier. Again, I think this is the most satisfying way for the story to build, though I don't want to get into why because that's major spoiler territory. All that being said, there is a reason that the game lets you play these missions in whatever order you want. If one of the missions I've told you to leave for later piques your interest now, then ignore me and go do it. Part of the fun of games with these kinds of variables are the differences, both large and small, between each player's experience. There's also DLC missions. Bring Down the Sky, which is available as an add-on to the original Mass Effect or as part of the Legendary Edition, and Pinnacle Station, which is only available as an add-on to the original version of Mass Effect 1. If you have them, they can more or less be played whenever, but they do kind of bring the main story to a halt, especially Pinnacle Station. It's probably best then to play them as early as possible, so that the main story hasn't had a chance to take off yet, or even leave them as bonuses for after the main campaign is done. When it comes to side missions, there's a lot, and you can do as few or as many as you want. If you're not going to do all of them, I would prioritize any given to you by your companions, but otherwise, just do the ones that sound interesting to you. I have my favorites, but I kind of want to let you discover yours yourself, so let's leave it at that. Part 8. Conclusion. I love the Mass Effect trilogy and could not be more excited about the release of the remastered Legendary Edition. By the time this video is released, I might be playing it. One of the things that excites me most about the remaster, however, is the amount of new players it's bound to bring in. I hope this video convinced you to check the first game out, and gave you a good handle on how to get the most out of your role-playing experience and your Shepard story. If it turns out the first Mass Effect isn't your cup of tea for combat mechanic reasons, and you're playing the original, not the remaster, then it is okay to skip to the second game. As I've said before, the combat is much smoother, and I plan on doing a video on Mass Effect 2 as well. Thank you so much for watching. Give this video a like if you got something out of it, subscribe to make sure you catch the next one, check out links in my description to see my other video game content, and in the meantime, I should go.